Peter Collignon, thank you for joining me. Look, I can't tell you how depressing it is to be a Victorian today. Can I just fact check with you a few things that we have been told on this grim day? First, that this Indian strain of the virus in Melbourne is infecting people in a single day. It doesn't take 5 days for the symptoms to emerge, not like the original strain, which is why apparently it's getting away from Victoria's contact tracers. Does this seem plausible to you?
Well, I'm not sure that's true. And you might remember with the UK strain, the same arguments were made. And in Adelaide, for instance, that you could pick it up in 1 day from pizza boxes, which wasn't true. I mean, as far as I can see, all these strains transmit the same way. Some are more infectious than others, for instance, the UK strain versus the original strain, but mainly because people excreted the virus for a day longer than the initial strain. But at the end of the day, it's still spread the same way. It's people close to others in crowded indoor situations that really facilitates the spread. And the things we do that we've always done still are very effective at stopping it spreading. You know, wearing masks if you're indoors, but particularly keep away from people who are unwell, keep your distance and keep crowds down. All of that has been very effective so far and should continue to be effective.
Well then, given all that, and given the fact, of course, that so many elderly people, the most vulnerable from this, particularly in nursing homes, they have been injected with a vaccine, not all of them, but many, most. Is this lockdown inevitable under these circumstances?
Well, my own view is that we do need lockdowns at certain time, but that's mainly when you've got a lot of community cases where you don't know where they're coming from. But so far, these cases have all been in a cluster that have linked. And I presume most of the people are being found are already in isolation because they're close contacts, or and that's why they were tested and found. Now, I guess we don't know how it's going to unfold, but you might remember back in January, there were over 30 cases related to that Thai restaurant breakout in Melbourne, and that was contained without having to have lockdowns. You know, these short lockdowns, I guess we only know in retrospect, but all the ones we've had so far in New Zealand, Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, as far as I can see, they haven't added much because all the cases that have been found would have been found by good contact tracing anyway.
Well, the third thing I'd like to check with you, that this outbreak was apparently caused by yet another breakdown in hotel quarantine. We've now had 17 outbreaks from quarantine hotels. And this one was from something as basic as someone opening a door, virus-loaded air, someone infected, virus-loaded air going into the corridor, hanging around for some seconds or minutes, and someone else, another man, the man that brought it to Melbourne, opening his door and getting sick. Now, I find it amazing that that could happen. Should Australia actually have purpose-built quarantine hotels to deal with those that are infected?
Well, I think there is an argument for having better facilities in some hotels, particularly, you know, their ventilation. But we need to put this in perspective. As far as I can see in quarantine hotels, nobody who is wearing a mask and eye protection have become infected. It's always when people are in reasonably close contact, that can sometimes be 3 or 4 metres, where they haven't had that protection. So I think we need to learn from that. There is this issue about aerosols in the air. The trouble with that is that they go large distances, they stay in the air for hours. This seems to me it's all people over the other side of a corridor when you open doors, or in the corridor if they're security guards. So if we actually take the basic precaution, which is wear a surgical mask, wear eye protection in the form of a face shield, if you're going anywhere near somebody that's got a reasonable chance of having COVID, that would have, I think, stopped a lot of these particular things. I think people expect there's no risk at all, but 100-fold decrease is what has happened with all these quarantines and what would happen if we hadn't had it. But you still get escapes. Even in places like Darwin, I wouldn't be surprised if occasionally you have staff members getting infected. It just will be less often there. It's less often with apartment hotels, and other hotels are more of a risk. But, you know, purpose-built facilities, for instance, as they're suggesting in Melbourne, they want a 500-bed facility built. Well, there may be some advantage in that, but it'll take probably 6 months before it's operational. And that only really accommodates 250 people a week because of the, you know, you've got to be there for 2 weeks. So, you know, it really means really decreasing the number of people coming back from overseas. And again, I'd stress, we've been very successful so far in bringing huge numbers of people back from overseas without much escape from hotels. Yes, there has been some, but other than the disaster last Melbourne, where it wasn't controlled, and there were a lot of identifiable factors, one would hope now with better cooperation, better knowledge, and better contact tracing, we can do better.
And of course, we've got to learn to accept some sort of risk as well, particularly if the vulnerable are getting vaccinated, then we should accept some risk of people getting infected, because it won't necessarily lead to the deaths that we saw before. But can I ask, speaking of vaccination, have you been vaccinated?
I have been vaccinated. I was vaccinated back in March because I work at a hospital. I'm in a higher risk group. So I've been vaccinated, and I'm getting all my friends and relatives who are all mostly over the age of 50. Every one of them I'm advising strongly to go and get vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine, because it's very effective. It's quite safe. It's just as effective as the Pfizer vaccine, but it's the one where we're manufacturing 1 million doses a week in Australia. So it's the one that's available. So we need to get people vaccinated who are in the highest risk group, particularly those over 70, but all those over 50. Please go and get vaccinated. It's for your benefit, your protection, if we do get COVID spread, and it's for the benefit of the community, because it means we can open up, take more risks, but without the consequences of things spreading, because the most vulnerable are protected, and also the vaccines don't totally protect you from mild infection, but they decrease the risk and therefore the risk to others in the community as well.
Peter Collignon, thank you very much for your time on such a rubbish day for Victorians.
Thank you.